This episode contains spoilers for Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cinephile Gamers podcast. I am your host, Bo Smith, and I am so sorry that I was not with you last week. You know, being an adult means you stay busy and lose all track of time, so when it came down to crunch time to put out an episode, I just had to take the L on it. So to my listeners in Belgium, Ireland, California, Mississippi, and everywhere else that has been a consistent listener for the most part, I'm sorry, and I missed you. However, if you do want to stay up to date with updates on the show, sneak peeks on upcoming episodes, you can follow the show on Facebook. And it's just the name of the show with the logo on it, so it should be pretty easy to find. I post other things as well from time to time, so it's a good place for occasional updates too. Now that the housekeeping's done, let's get on with the episode. I've completed a couple of games recently that I am passionate about and was really trying to decide what to do next. But I think I wanted to continue my dive into the Kingdom Hearts series, especially after Kingdom Hearts 4 was just recently announced and dropped a trailer. If you haven't looked at that yet, go see it. Sora has this crazy real-life look that really emulates like more of the recent Final Fantasy titles. I'm pretty curious to see where it leads, but anyways, the next game we're going to be covering in this series is going to be in release order, so Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. And while it's not a numbered game, it is a direct sequel to the first game, and it takes place shortly after the ending of the first game as well. It was originally released in 2004 for the Game Boy Advance and would later receive a remake for the PS2 here in America in 2008. For this episode, we're going to be taking a look at the remake that is used in the 1.5 collection pack for the PlayStation 4. What makes this version of the game different from its handheld counterpart is that everything is now in 3D, voice acting is included in some sections of the game, new scenes were added to the story, and some of the gameplay was revamped. I'll go into more detail on that later, but now let's just jump into the story. When we last left off, our trio, Sora, Donald, and Goofy, were in search of finding a new way to rescue Riku and King Mickey who were locked in the Realm of Darkness. They end up in a place called Castle Oblivion, a strange castle that's all white and has barren rooms. And as they arrived, a man dressed in a black coat appears, and the group prepares to fight him. However, they soon find out that they've forgotten all their abilities. The man explains that the deeper they go into the castle, the more memories they will lose, but they'll also uncover new memories in the process. He creates a deck of cards made from Sora's and his friends' memories, and tells them that everything they encounter in this castle will be based on their memories. So now Sora and the group must traverse the many floors of the castle, encountering the memories of previous worlds they have visited to discover the castle's mystery, and find new memories as well. First off, I like the reason of how you start back to basics, essentially. I think it's clever, and you don't see that very often. And while some may think that you are retreading through the first game, the story is actually different enough that you want to see what happens in these versions of the previous worlds. The individual plot lines of each world revolve around the theme of memory, just like the overall narrative. Not to mention that in between each floor, you will usually get a cutscene or boss fight that advances the overall plot of the story. As you advance through the castle, Sora's memories get altered, and then he starts to lose all sense of what's real and what isn't. And for those new to the game, it's a pretty enthralling narrative that makes you wonder what the villain's endgame is. Now, cards are the name of the game as they are used in both traversal and in combat. The field map is an isometric view of the room where you are able to roam around freely and interact with objects that may contain cards or orbs. To go from room to room, you must use map cards which alter the room you enter. Each card color has a specific effect. Red cards affect how strong or weak enemies are, or if they have any attributes. Green cards affect the power of your deck, and blue cards are rooms that can contain treasure, save points, Moogle shops, or randomize what you get. You'll get new map cards after each fight you win. Combat is very complex on an initial run of the game, but once you understand the system, it can actually be really fun to experiment with. You'll be able to build a deck with attack cards, magic cards, and potions that will bring back cards that were used. You have a certain amount of card points, or CP, which you can gain through leveling up. The more CP you have, the more cards you'll be able to add to your deck. Each card in your deck is randomly ranked from 0 to 9. If your card number is higher than an opponent's card, let's just say for example you have a 7, they have a 3, then you'll be able to attack or use that card before them, with the exception of the number 0. A 0 value card can break any opponent's move if played afterwards. However, if played before, they have an opportunity to break your card as well. Sora can combine 3 cards into a slate. This has 2 advantages. 1, it combines the 3 card totals for a higher ranking number that's hard to break. And 2, some slates can make powerful combat moves or increase magic spells' effectiveness. However, the only downside to constantly doing slates is that when you reshuffle your deck, you will lose that first card from the slate for the rest of the combat. Throughout your adventure, you will pick up some boss cards or sometimes enemies cards. Each one can be added to your deck and can give a random effect such as increasing card numbers or making all cards 0. Some are definitely more useful than others, but you can build your deck however you want and find a style that matches something that you would agree with. Battles are done in a more traditional RPG format. You can engage in an enemy on the world map, and whenever you touch it, you switch to a battle screen. Donald, Goofy, and other Disney partners are relegated to cards as well, so they will randomly appear and you can pick them up so they can be added to the top of your deck. If you thought Donald was a terrible healer in the last game, then be prepared to be extremely disappointed. He uses 2 random spells whenever he's summoned. It can either be Fire, Blizzard, Thunder, or Cure. So if you are hoping he heals you in a pinch, he may cast 2 fire spells on a fire enemy and heal them instead. And yes, I am still very bitter about that. When you beat an enemy, they will drop experience point orbs, but you need to collect them in order to gain experience. Once you level up, you will be allowed to choose from one of 3 options: increase health, increase CP, or learn a new slate combo. From my experience, your priority should be to invest in the last 2 options first. As long as you're dodging enemy attacks, wiping them out quickly, you can survive with low HP for a while. I mentioned before that this game initially started off the Game Boy Advance back in 2004. I was 10 at the time I first played it, and while the sprite work was really cool, I didn't really care very much for the game itself. To me, it was hard to dodge enemy attacks when fighting since you were in a 2D battle mode space, and the deck building process was not really explained very well. I kept feeling underleveled for most of the boss fights and didn't have very many cards that would sustain me long in boss fights. But when I picked up the remake on the game on PlayStation 2, it felt like it was a much more fleshed out game and easier to grasp. I was also a little bit older then, so I was able to understand some of those concepts a little bit better as well. With the remake of Chain of Memories on these collection packs, there's also more added to the game as well. Along with the addition of new slate combinations, there's also new battle cards too. After completing the main campaigns of the game, you get access to new Keyblade cards that were exclusive in Kingdom Hearts Final Mix, as well as from Kingdom Hearts 2. If you don't mind going out of chronological order a bit, you can watch all of the cutscenes from Kingdom Hearts 358 out of 2 days. Watching the collection and starting Chain of Memories back up will allow you to access new Organization 13 cards in treasure rooms. These enemy cards can really power up your deck depending on the build you go for. The best one, in my opinion, is Roxas's card, which lets you do double damage for a set amount of attacks. On top of the new mechanics and added cards, new animated cutscenes with voice acting is added into the castle sections of the story as well. While it was originally relegated to just text boxes, it's nice to hear voices given to the organization members. If you played Kingdom Hearts 2 before, you will know that Axel is still given the same voice and continues to give a great performance as well. But the other standout to me is Larxene, who does a fantastic job of antagonizing Sora and really getting on your nerves. Vexen is also a close second for me because he does a great job as coming off as pretentious, and you really get the point that he tries to act like the smartest person in the room, which blinds him from other people's motives. Something about hearing character voices and certain dialogue inflections really elevate a story in my opinion. Speaking of story, let's continue on with the rest of the game. Spoilers ahead for those who want to finish the game first, then come back and listen to the rest of the podcast. As the game continues through the castle, Sora begins to remember an old childhood friend named Naminé, a blonde-haired girl who lived on Destiny Islands. He even pulls out a lucky charm she gave him. Sora also finds Riku in the castle, but Riku acts like how he was in the first half of Kingdom Hearts, and blames Sora for Naminé being held captive at Castle Oblivion at the time. He even pulls out the same lucky charm Sora has and shares the exact same story Sora had of how he received it. After a couple more encounters, Sora learns that Vexen created a replica of Riku for research of creating new beings and to fight Sora. Axel, who turns out to be a double agent for the organization, releases Naminé so that she can find Sora. She eventually tells him that she has a gift of erasing the memories of people and implanting new ones. She was captured by Marluxia, who was leading a group of members at Castle Oblivion, and he was the one who lured Sora into the castle and was going to wipe his memories in the hopes of using him and Larxene in overthrowing the rest of Organization 13. Sora forgives Naminé partly because he's just an overly caring person and partly because he really can't fathom Naminé not being real at this point. Sora makes his way to the top of the castle and fights Axel, who flees the castle and then defeats Marluxia. Afterwards, Naminé said she could restore Sora, Donald, and Goofy's memories by putting them into these cryostasis-like pods. However, in doing so, they will forget Naminé and the events that happened at Castle Oblivion. They agree to go through with it, with Sora promising to find Naminé when he reawakens, believing that even though his memories will be erased, he will remember her in his heart. Jiminy Cricket, which I don't think I mentioned at all in the last Kingdom Hearts podcast episode, has been adventuring with the trio and writing down notes of the adventures in his journals. So he writes down the words, "Thank Naminé," so that they can remember to do so when they reawaken. The credits roll. You see Kairi looking at her home of Destiny Islands. Replica Riku wanders the castle when Axel appears and seems to make a proposition to him, and you see a blonde-haired boy walking through a town, but the camera cutting off before revealing his face. This puts a nice little bow on the game, but when you get back to the main menu after saving, Riku takes over on the title screen and you see the words "Reverse Rebirth" highlighted. Turns out there's actually a second story mode to this game. Riku's story is played congruently with Sora's story. Riku awakens in the realm of darkness, where a disembodied voice tells him that he can stay there and sleep in the darkness, or he can take a path towards the truth. Riku chooses the latter and is transported to the basement floor of Castle Oblivion, where he's given a card based on his memories of Hollow Bastion. After clearing out the first floor, Ansem appears before Riku, revealing that Riku still has a piece of Ansem inside of him, and that he relies on the darkness, and Ansem tries to take control of Riku's body once again. But an apparition of King Mickey appears to ward off Ansem and to help Riku on his adventure. It's also at this point that Vexen confronts Riku and acquires data on him to create a replica version of Riku, so now you know how there's a replica version of Riku roaming the castle. So now you must play as Riku to go through the basement levels of the castle in order to fight your inner demons and make it back out onto the main floor to escape Castle Oblivion. While most of the gameplay is pretty similar in Riku's story, there are a few differences that change up the formula. Riku's story is much shorter than Sora's, as when traversing through the memory worlds, many of them you only need to beat the boss in order to move on. There's no really story except for in a couple of them. The biggest difference is that your card deck is already determined each floor you advance, and you cannot alter it in any way, change the order of anything, nothing. Overall, this is a major relief just because you don't have to worry about finding out your playstyle with a new character, and you just need to get familiar with the cards given to you and find out the best strategy for each battle on the floor you're on. In fact, in most cases, it's easier just spamming the attack button and hoping for the best. Since you don't have any CP, you'll also be able to use every boss card you receive, which might give you more incentive to try out each one if you didn't have the opportunity to do so in Sora's campaign. What really separates Riku from Sora is after clearing the first floor, you will have access to your dark form, which powers up your attacks and makes fights go by much more quickly. To switch to dark mode, you must accumulate at least 30 dark points from point differences and card breaks. After you transform, you can stay in dark mode as long as you don't run out of dark points from attacks being broken or taking enough damage. It sounds like a lot, but honestly, you'll get used to it after a couple of encounters. New to this version of the game is the duel system, which is exclusive to Riku's mode. If you play a card with the same card number at the exact same time an enemy does, then you can initiate a duel where the enemy lays down a card and you must play a card in your deck that matches the number or is greater than the number. If you play enough cards successfully, Riku will unleash a powerful slate move that can quickly kill an enemy, and even surrounding ones too. You could try to put some strategy behind it, but honestly, if you spam cards quickly enough, you should be able to beat enough cards within the time limit to get an attack off. When Riku levels up, you have 3 options to choose from as well: increasing health, increasing attack power, or increasing amount of dark points you start out with. I highly encourage you to invest in attack power and then dark points, then health. Much like Sora, as long as you're dodging enemy attacks and wiping them out quickly, you can survive with low HP for a while. Since Riku only has access to 1 weapon card throughout his campaign, that is why you have the option to increase attack power. And if you're utilizing the best slates while in dark mode, then you should be able to take out bosses in a matter of seconds. Now, let's get back to the rest of the story. Riku encounters and defeats two other organization members not included in Sora's story. The names are Lexaeus and Zexion. He's given a world to Twilight Town, which is supposed to be the other half of Sora's heart that was mentioned in his story. There he meets a mysterious individual named Darkness N0, or Diz for short. Diz has seen Riku struggle with Ansem and wishes to help him, believing that Riku could be a powerful ally. He tells Riku to go meet with Naminé, but on the way there he's found by Replica Riku, now knowing of his fake memories, who seeks to justify his existence by killing the real Riku. You defeat the Replica as he accepts his fate of being a fake and that he is swallowed by darkness. Riku finds Naminé and she shows him Sora sleeping in a pod and explains what happened to him. She tells him that she can also put him to sleep and lock the remaining darkness in his heart so Ansem can't get him. Riku decides to face off against Ansem himself and heads to the main floor of Castle Oblivion where he defeats Ansem in a relatively easy fight depending on how overleveled you are. Afterwards, Riku and Mickey leave the castle wearing coats that the organization members wear to ward off darkness and keep themselves hidden. They find Diz outside the castle, who asks them if they are choosing to walk the path of light or the path of darkness. Riku says he is choosing the middle path, the road to dawn, as the game fades to black. As the credits roll again, you are treated to a couple of new snippets, this time with an older-looking Riku coming back to Sora's pod, Axel taking the blonde-haired boy to get ice cream, and then the same boy talking to a group of friends, revealing his face finally. You'll learn soon enough that this kid is named Roxas, who plays a major role in later Kingdom Hearts games. So, what happens after you beat Reverse Rebirth mode? There isn't any post-game content for Riku, but if you go back to your save file with Sora, you will be able to get new cards like Zexion and Lexaeus to add to your card collection. Other than that, the only other option is to go for 100% completion, and as someone who likes to get all achievements, I don't recommend doing that. Most of the trophies you'll be able to get naturally, which is typically story progression or some combat-based stuff. There are some annoying trophies like getting certain high scores in the 100 Acre Wood minigames, but they're not all that difficult. What is the most time-consuming is getting both Sora and Riku to level 99 and collecting all the cards for your journals. On average, you are probably going to beat both stories around level 50, but because this is an RPG, you are going to really have to grind the final world in order to get the most amount of experience points to level up anymore. It's really boring to do, especially since there isn't any side bosses or optional content that you're working towards either, it's just the trophy. And while it's easy to get all of the cards for Riku since that will happen naturally anyways, the same cannot be said for Sora. Along with watching all of the 358 over 2 days cutscenes to get additional Keyblade and enemy cards, you still have to get those cards from random bounty rooms or special treasure rooms. The biggest catch is getting all the enemy cards because the only way to get them is by defeating the specific enemy last in battle. But it's so random what type of card you will get in the end of battle, and 9.5 times out of 10, it's more than likely going to be a map card. I have scoured the internet and there is no definitive way to increase your chances of getting an enemy card. It's just random dumb luck. Early on, I had gotten a decent amount of enemy cards, but after checking my journal and seeing how much I was actually missing, I decided not to even bother with it. Now there is a completion bonus to getting all the cards in Sora's campaign. After getting all the possible cards, you will be able to get the gold card from a random bounty room, and that allows you to retrieve premium cards to your deck on 5 reloads, which would be an excellent card to have in general. After receiving that, you'll be able to get the platinum card from, you guessed it, a random bounty room. This card will allow you to be invincible until you have landed 20 individual hits. They're both great game-breaking cards, but honestly, it's just too much time and too much trouble to be worth getting them. So, what do I think of Kingdom Hearts Re-Chain of Memories? Like I mentioned before, I didn't initially care for the GBA version, but after growing up and getting the remake of the game, I think it is a very unique game and one of the most underrated in the series. A lot of that has to do with the fact that it is mostly different gameplay-wise in the entire series. While the rest are mostly like hack and slash type of games, Chain of Memories makes you come up with a strategy that you will have to change up every now and then, and you still have to be precise with your attacks. Otherwise, you're just wasting a card essentially. That being said, after learning a few slate combinations for Sora, you just need to put in the necessary cards in your deck to keep spamming the attack, and you can defeat some of the late game bosses without any real concerns. With Riku, after leveling up your attack power and dark mode enough times, all you really need to do is just quickly spam the attack button and not give your enemies a chance to attack in order to win. It really is the easier mode of the two and doesn't necessarily require a ton of strategy. As for the story, I think it's a lot of fun and it's entertaining. Some of the Disney Worlds can be a slog when you really just want to get to the main arc of the story, but at least it's different enough that you don't feel like you're totally retreading through the same waters of the first game. There are some quirky dialogue moments from Riku's story where apparently he can smell the darkness emanating off bad guys, which is a really funny thing to hear, and it's never brought up again in any of the future games. That being said, I felt the story was pretty cohesive overall, especially compared to the later entries, and you do get invested into it. You especially develop stronger emotions of love or hate for certain characters now that you can hear them speak and how they interact with our heroes. This is one of those games that I am glad got a major facelift, and it elevated it to a much better status than the original could have been given. I give Kingdom Hearts Re-Chain of Memories an 8 out of 10. It is at least on par with the first Kingdom Hearts game, but I could probably give it an 8.5 out of 10 because sometimes I do prefer this game over the first one in the series. So, have you played Kingdom Hearts Re-Chain of Memories, or did you play the original handheld version? What do you think of this entry? You can follow me on Patreon and let me know, or go to our Facebook and Twitter pages where you can reach out to me and let me know. Make sure you share this podcast with other video game enthusiasts or people who love movies. I plan on putting out reviews of The Northman and The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent soon, and I'm excited to view those two movies. As always, thank you guys for listening in, and I can't wait to talk with you on the next episode.